Welcome to the Excel Pod. Welcome to the Untied podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement, because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Bernethy. I'm one of the hosts of this show, along with my very good friend Corey Sawyers, who is coming to us from Virginia this morning and has been West Virginia this morning and doing some good work over there. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're looking forward to this part 2 of a study that we started last week over anger and lust in Matthew chapter 5. This week will be in 27, and we'll see how far we get as we think about these different contrasts within the Sermon on the Mount. This has been a great study I could say a great study for me. I've enjoyed the conversation, the study that we've had together, Corey. And we hope that you have too, as we have gone through this. We just pray that you've been edified by this and challenged and been able to look at Scripture in a wonderful way that will help you grow in your daily walk. So we're just grateful to have this opportunity to share these conversations with you. And so thank you for joining us. As always, we hope that you will like, share, follow, and subscribe. Help this podcast to grow so that it can reach more and more people, not only in the U.S., but also around the world. It's funny how all that connects and how much it can spread very quickly. And your help would be greatly appreciated as we share these wonderful things. And so, as always, let's go ahead and get started, Corey. What's been cooking, man?
Well, as you said, we're in West Virginia. It's almost heaven. Some mountain mamas and all that, but we are, I'm actually in Charleston, West Virginia today, not to be confused with Charleston, South Carolina, where everybody goes for vacations. Charleston, West Virginia is the capital of West Virginia, but the Danville Church of Christ, which is about maybe 25 minutes or so, kind of southwest of, we're actually down in the southwest corner of West Virginia, not very far from the Kentucky line, but we're in the Danville congregation. We're doing an evangelism seminar this week, trying to share maybe some thoughts about how to be better at, more effective at sharing Jesus with others. And so, we think about evangelism. I think what we usually think of is mission trips or door knocking campaigns, or, do you have the right method or study or whatever? And what we're trying to see from a biblical model of that is more about building relationships, being a witness for Jesus, going deeper, turning physical conversations into spiritual conversations, those kinds of things. And so it's been very encouraging for me. It was a good study for me to put the 6 lessons together on evangelism, and it's been an encouraging week. Everyone has been very, very kind and very complimentary, and seemed to be taking in everything very well, and have had a lot of people make comments like, you're right, this is something I can do. And that's what hopefully they get out of this, is that evangelism is something that everyone can do and everyone should be doing. So,
yeah. Well, that's always the big questions. Can I do this? There's always a lot of fear with it, rejection, all that kind of stuff. But like you said, I think that we have a wrong understanding of what evangelism should be, or is, and I don't know what to attribute that to. There's been a lot of great work that has been done throughout the years, but I think it's created for the sake of the title of our podcast, a traditional mindset that the only way that you can evangelize is to knock on a door, and that's just simply not the case. Not that that's bad. That's certainly not a bad practice. But there's so many different ways that we can reach out to our communities, we think about just the work of Excel Still More as a whole, or this podcast. We're able to do this and reach different countries, and what that looks like, I don't know, but that's all truly in one way or another a form of evangelistic effort, as we're able to teach in a lot of areas. But I think you hit it on the head. The idea of relationships and building all that together really is a great model. Probably is the model.
Yeah, and just being, we don't change the message, but like you were talking about with door knocking, is that the most effective route for our culture? Maybe in times past or in other places, maybe different places it is or it is not. But one of the things that we've talked about, even Jesus, like Jesus handled Nicodemus in John 3 differently than he did the Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4.
Sure.
He handled the rich young ruler differently than he did Zacchaeus. So Jesus didn't even use the same method every time. He adapted it in the environment that he was in and with the people that he was with, and that's where it all has to begin: is get to know people and show them that you care, and then hopefully that opens up doors for you to share Jesus with them. But
yeah.
Anyway, it's been good, I think, and hopefully, one of the preachers last night was talking about, they're from down the road a little bit, and he was saying that, we'll know if I would come back to West Virginia to do something like this for them, because he said, I think our congregation could benefit from this. And so, the material, of course, it's from the Bible, so that's what makes it valuable. But the material is, I think opening up some eyes to, we've like a lot of things, as you said, because of our tradition, we've complicated things more than they really need to be sometimes. So anyway,
which we're very good at doing.
Yeah. But it's been a good week, and we've got to meet a lot of good people. Of course, the preacher here at the Danville Church of Christ is Brandon Blankenship. Brandon is a Bear Valley graduate and a good friend of mine, and so he and his wife Hannah, they have 3 wonderful children, and they're doing a good work here. And he's a West Virginia born and bred, and so this is all home for him. And so we got to spend a little time with them. We got to stop over in Eastern Kentucky and spend a little time with DeAndre Hensley, who I went to school with at Bear Valley. We were in the same class, and he and his wife Autumn are in Winchester, Kentucky, which is a little bit east of Lexington. That's where DeAndre preaches, and he's doing a good work there. And that's one of the good things about stuff like this, is getting to see people and meet new people, but see people that you don't get to see as often as you'd like. So anyway.
Yeah, that's always a good time.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity. Go out and be able to do that. And who knows, this may be a big door to open up for you. I've got some ideas I'll be talking to you about. Oh, man. Well, that's great. So you guys are going to be stopping somewhere on the way home. I think you mentioned last week. Big place for you guys. Home of a certain individual, Andy Griffith.
We're not too far from where we're at here, Mount Airy, North Carolina. Of course, when we came up here, went up into Kentucky and across. That was the easiest way from Northwest Tennessee to get here, the fastest way. But going home, we're going to go down to Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is Andy Griffith's hometown. And I don't remember if I said this last week or not, but coming up June is his birthday. June the 1st is his birthday. And he would be 100 years old this year. So
Wow.
they're planning a big celebration down in Mount Airy for that. But we've been there a couple of times. We went before. We haven't been married but a couple of years. In September, they have a big Mayberry Days festival that we went to. We went back in about 20, maybe 16 or 17, in King, North Carolina, which is nearby. I held a gospel meeting down there for them, but we stayed in Mount Airy. And so we've been there a couple times, but there's lots. I mean, you can just imagine everything in the town is so focused on Andy Griffith and Andy Griffith Show, and lots of things to do and see there. So we're going to stop by there for a night and see some of that before we travel across Tennessee this time and go back to Martin. So, but anyway, just a little fun side adventure for us there.
Well,
I don't know how much Melody enjoys it, but I love it, and she at least allows me that time to fulfill my Andy Griffith fantasies. So,
well, just a fun fact for you that your own Opie Taylor, Ron Howard, graduated from the University of Oklahoma this year.
Tyler King texted me.
Yep. So
he said I got to see Opie graduate college today.
Yep.
And I don't know, he's got to be like 72-ish or something by now.
Probably.
The Andy Griffith Show started in 1960, and I want to think he was 6 then, if I'm not mistaken, when the show first started. So he's got to be around 72, 73 years old. So by the time he did something with his life.
Yeah, about time. That's right. I would assume it's a doctorate or something that he got, but I saw that, and of course I thought, well, I've got to bring that up to Corey. So,
yep. Yeah. And actually, another connect. West Virginia is actually the home state of Don Knotts, who played Barney Fife. And I thought maybe we could go by his hometown, but he's from Morgantown, which is up in the northeast corner of West Virginia, so it would be way out of the way. So, but
I don't know.
But you're in West Virginia when we're traveling down from where we're staying down to Danville. We went by the Little Coal River Bridge and the Little Coal River Road, and then we went down a little bit further and we saw the Hatfield and McCoy Visitor Center.
Ooh.
And I said, we're definitely in West Virginia. We're in coal country, and the Hatfields and McCoys. So,
man, that would be cool to see.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to go by it tomorrow afternoon and look around at it.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
Some of the history there. Yeah.
What a famous feud. That was terrible.
And now they have big. In fact, we had a couple of years ago. There's 2 Robert Hatfield preachers. One preaches at Henderson Church of Christ, but the other Robert Hatfield preaches right now in Alabama, but he's a Bear Valley graduate, and he's from Eastern Kentucky. And he jokingly, I said, "You're not part of the Hatfield McCoys," and he said, "Actually, I'm a descendant of those Hatfields." And so Tyler and I, at that point, decided we couldn't recruit a McCoy to come to Bear Valley for the next 2 years while Robert was there. But,
yeah.
Anyway, but Robert has been to the big reunion that they have with all the Hatfield and McCoy descendants, and but anyway, he's told me a whole lot about the history of the feud and the area. He was, like I said, he's from Eastern Kentucky, and Brandon was from West Virginia, so I got to hear quite a bit about the history around of what all went on with all of that through them. But of course, I like history, but I really like local American history, Tennessee history, local history that how it affects us. I guess maybe a little bit more specifically, but
yeah.
Every time we go to get a chance to do a gospel meeting or something like that, we Melody, again, she's not a big history buff, but she goes along with me, and I love learning about that kind of stuff, the local history around in an area, and if I can work it into sermons, then it kind of connects with people because it's what they're familiar with, but also shows them that, hey, he's actually studied the history here to know a few things.
Yeah,
But anyway.
yeah. I'm the same
But
way.
particularly when it's something as famous as the Hatfield-McCoy feud,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen documentaries on that. I watched the series that was done with it. Of course, anybody, if you're
Kevin Costner.
Yeah, definitely deserves something to take out the stuff in it. Clear Play or VidAngel. I don't know if it's on VidAngel. It's been several years. I've only seen that series once, but if that really did anything justice, my goodness, what a crazy feud.
Yeah, and like most feuds over really nothing.
Yeah.
Tying all this together, there's an Andy Griffith episode where you've got two families that are feuding. And there's a point in which Andy is trying to figure out what's going on. And it's kind of a take off the Hatfield-McCoys and Romeo and Juliet and some of those kind of things. But he goes and there's the two fathers of the families that are, kind of heading up what's going on with the feud between the two families. He goes to talk to both of them to try to figure out what's going on with them. And it's the Wakefields and the Carters, I think it is. But he goes to Mr. Carter's and he's like, so tell me why you're feuding. And he said, because we're shooting at one another. And he said, but why are you shooting at one another? And he said, because they're Wakefields. And he said, but why are you shooting at the Wakefields? And he said, because we're feuding with each other. He said, but why are you feuding with each other? He said, because we're shooting at one another. And he says, but why are you feuding and shooting at each other? And he said, because they're a Wakefield. And Andy goes, oh. And then he says, I now know why Friar Tuck had so much trouble when talking about Romeo and Juliet. So, that's kind of the deal. You get to fighting and fussing, and you don't even know why you're fussing and fighting anymore. You're just fussing and fighting because you're fussing and fighting. And it's funny when it's on the Andy Griffith Show, but it's not so funny when it's real life or in the church.
And it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I guarantee you can walk into every church building that has had some kind of division in the past. Nothing recent, they'll know then, but if it's been a little while, they may have a feeling toward the other congregation or to this family or to that person, and they really don't know why. It's just there.
Yep.
It's just there.
Yep.
Sad deal. But, the Hatfield and McCoy feeling that they had for one another, is a lot. It's not the same at all, but it is very close to kind of how the feud is between Jesus and the Pharisees. Of course, that's one-sided, by the way. The Pharisees toward Jesus. Jesus doesn't really have this feud, but he's certainly getting frustrated. And but it really is the same kind of idea that it's really over. It's not really over anything. It's just over how they feel.
Yep.
And that traditional idea. So,
yep,
folks, we got to untie from all that stuff. Got to untie from it. Yep. Well, before we get into our study, I don't know if you've looked this up, but you've been doing this every week, so I felt like let's keep this old tradition up. Today is World Family Doctor Day.
You know what else it is today?
What?
It's National Devil's Food Cake Day.
I saw that. And
which I'm not supposed to be having, but I figure if I'm doing the Lord's work, I can maybe eat some devil's food cake tonight after church.
Well, here's another one. You probably have this pulled up. It's National May Ray Day.
Yeah.
Which is...
get out in the sun.
Yeah, be out in the sun, be outdoors. It's also National Malcolm X Day. The civil rights leader, of course. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've got pulled up.
Yep.
So happy National Devil Food Cake Day.
And today is Tuesday that we're recording this, but which I should have said because Thursday somebody shows up at the Danville Church of Christ, they'll not find me there. But this Tuesday that we're recording this, we have the Martin Westview baseball team is currently in Murfreesboro playing in the state baseball tournament, and the Dresden, my home school where I graduated from, both the girls and the boys are there playing in the softball and baseball tournaments. And Greenfield High School, where Melody graduated from, all in the same county, is in the baseball state tournament for the very first time ever. So all of that is going on today as well.
Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah. So go Chargers, Lions, and Jackets.
There you go. Play hard today,
and eat
boys.
Some devil's food cake. Yeah. They'll get the May rays, and then they can go get some devil's food cake.
There you go. Good day and a good evening.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Corey, we've got a big study to continue.
Okay.
And for those who are checking in with us, whether you, if you did not catch the first part of this study, you can go back to episode 6 of season 4 here right on Untied. But today, that's a part 1, and today's a part 2 to our series over anger and lust, as we're looking here in the Sermon on the Mount, where we're starting around 26, 27, and moving forward throughout this as we're looking at the different contrasts that are made here. And I want to go ahead and bring this up for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube. And if you are tuning in on YouTube, we sure do appreciate it and hope that you will follow our YouTube channel. That, of course, helps us. And, of course, we hope that you'll follow the podcast as well. We're on pretty much everything, so do that for us. But we have we went through last week and highlighted 2 very important phrases that are found all throughout here. And it's this, I say to you, or truly I say to you, or you have heard, or it was said, 3 different kind of versions of that. And so Jesus is making this argument about that is going against everything that the rabbis have been teaching, the Mishnah has been teaching, the different things that have been going on for quite a while at this point, as the Sanhedrin has built over this 400-year period. And so they've come to this point in their ministry and their rule or whatever. It's probably more of a rule than it is anything. I know in my study in the Gospel of Mark, that's kind of one thing that has jumped out, that the Sanhedrin, the scribes and the Pharisees, mainly what's been talked about up front, that they've kind of taken over the kingdom, if you will. They've taken over the hearts and minds of the people. They have been, really working on them and holding them to a standard, if you will, of their traditional thought, their traditional teaching. And when Jesus comes into the picture, he's now calling them out on all of their teachings and their thoughts and things like that. And so that really plays an important part to this phrase, you have heard, but I say. You have heard, but I say. Well, the things that they have heard are the things that have been taught from other rabbis, from their own writings, but not from the scriptures. They're based on those things. And now he's saying with authority, but I say to you. And so we talked a lot about that in our last podcast, and that really is laying out the foundation for the rest of chapter 5, as we're going to see that. And if you're looking at this, you're going to see this all throughout the rest of the chapter. And I highly encourage you, if you've got your Bible open or taking notes or whatever you're doing, to get in there and highlight that, because it'll really begin to lay out some good stuff for you. So, Corey, where do we want to start here Then we made it through, I believe, verse 26. So I think we're in 27, starting with this second contrast.
Yeah, the first one was anger, and now the second one in verses 27 through 32 is adultery or lust, whichever you want to call it. The you have heard it said, but I say unto you there in verse 27, 28, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And so, again, we've talked about last week and previous how that the Pharisees had kind of expanded or twisted or changed what God had taught in the old law. What they had basically had kind of relaxed the law. You can look, you can lust, but you can't touch, which would be adultery. And again, Jesus is calling us to a higher level of spirituality. He says if anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent, or I think, is that the New American Standard you got up there?
Yes, sir.
It says, who looks at a woman with lust for her, or the idea is if you look to lust, that's why you're looking, then it's a sin. So the point that he's making is no one really typically, maybe there's some exceptions, but no one typically, like we talked about last week, they don't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to commit murder out of the blue. There's something that's led to that. And same with this. How many get up in the morning intending to commit adultery? Well, probably not a lot, but how many have lusted? And if you don't lust, then you don't commit adultery. So what he's trying to do, going back to our Andy Griffith discussion, like Barney Fife would say, is to nip it in the bud. Job 31 and verse 1, I made a covenant with my eyes that I would not look upon any young woman. The Pharisees were teaching something that was very dangerous. You can lust, and you can get right up to the edge of that cliff, right at the very point of falling over, but then you're going to pull back. And we talk about it all the time with alcohol or gambling addictions or whatever. If you keep getting too close to the edge, at some point you're going to fall, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So the idea here is looking with lust. In the Greek, it's the word that should be really translated as to. You're looking at a woman to lust after her. That's the purpose of the lust. If you see someone that is attractive and or maybe improperly dressed or whatever, and you look away, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about, you look and you see, and then you, like David on top of the roof, you keep on looking. And the longer that you keep on looking to lust, it's going to eventually lead to something worse.
So I've got here, this is the idea of what actual, in our day, and of course in their day too, but this is what actual Christian behavior should look like. Or this is the contrast, that somebody who is walking obediently faithful with God is not doing this very thing. Right. But those who are being lenient, like you said, and they're allowing themselves to be okay with certain things, and you're looking at this woman, for instance, with the purpose of lusting, then that's where you're crossing the line. Now, there is a difference between the actual act of adultery and what Jesus is talking about here. And what Jesus is talking about here is what you're doing from within, from the from your heart. And the actual act of adultery, of course, is the physical, sexual sin that is involved with what's going on there. But what Jesus is getting at within his ministry as a whole is, as time goes by, we're going to start seeing more and more Jesus talking about the heart. And as he talks about the heart, he's going to talk about the hardness of heart that the scribes had, that the Pharisees had, even that the disciples had within, as different things occur, such as whenever Andrew brings the boy up with the fish and the bread, and they're not sure what's going to happen. Well, they have just seen what has gone on. He fed all these people, and Jesus asked them a question: Do you have hard hearts? So the heart is such a big part of the teaching that Jesus is offering here. It's a major focus of what's going on all throughout his ministry, and we find that God he's establishing hearts. He's looking into the heart, and as Paul would write in 1 Thessalonians. But even whenever Jesus was standing there in the house, and the scribes are at his feet, they let the man down through the ceiling. He is looking into their thoughts. So we have this idea of when we're thinking about the heart, we're talking about mind, heart, soul. It's all the same thing. It's from what is within you. If it's coming from who you are, from what you are, from the inner man, that's where a huge problem lies and is leading down, of course, a sinful path. And the reality is that if you're going to be lenient with this thing, then you're more likely to be lenient with a lot of other things, which is really interesting because as you go throughout the story of Jesus, you have, such as in Mark chapter 3, Jesus is going to go into the synagogue. He's going to heal the man who has the hand that's all withered. And this is supposed to be a place where people are focused on the Word of God. They're arguing about the Sabbath day, whether he can heal a man, but at the same time, they're going to a people that they hate, and the Herodians, and they come together for the purpose of killing Jesus. So there's no standard that's actually, there's no standard that's occurring within these folks right now because they're so blinded by what they think that religion is or what they think the law should be. And there's a great deal of lenience, which means that they really don't have a standard in their mind of what Christian behavior actually looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point of the consequences are different. And you might write down in your Bibles, if you like to write notes, 1 John 3 and verse 15 beside this, because he talks about in 1 John 3:15 that if you hate your brother, that you're a murderer, and no murderer belongs in the kingdom. Well, if somebody hates someone in their heart, does that mean we're going to lock them up in jail? Give them life in prison? Well, of course not. But the point that he's making, as you're saying, is that the Pharisees again they were relaxing parts of the law and saying that it's okay to do this thing, but it's worse to do that thing. None of them would say it's okay to commit adultery, but they're saying it's okay to do everything up to the point of adultery. And again, if you've got the right kind of heart, then you understand those guardrails are there for a reason to keep you from jumping off that cliff. So you're not over there on the edge trying to see how close we can get before we fall. You're trying to stay as far away from those things as you can. And so Jesus is saying, don't even go down that road, because no, you've not committed physical adultery with someone in the flesh, but in your mind, in your heart, that's what you're doing. Is the same kind of concept or idea, is that you're thinking about them in an improper way. So, again, that all of these different areas, that's the danger, these contrasts, that's the danger in what the Pharisees are doing. Is there's certain things they would say, absolutely not, throw the book at them, but then they're relaxing certain portions of the law towards, it's okay to, I hate to keep using the same illustration, but I don't know a better way to say it. You're getting right up to the edge of the cliff before you fall off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting, and I don't know that we're, I don't know. I try not to use blanket statements, but we today are not that much different. The folks that were in this, they were part of the Pharisaical sect, or the scribes, or even the Sadducees. They've all got their stuff. And we know that not every single person who might have been involved in that was a bad person. Some of them were probably very good people, but they had very wrong ideas, and they were fed wrong ideas for a long time, and so they buy in. Did every one of them agree on everything? I don't think that would be the case. That's never been the case in human history, that everybody just agrees on something. So for us to look at them and say, this is you and you're not like anybody else, would not be fair. Because
right.
I guarantee you that you and me and everybody listening to this and everybody that has the ability, the opportunity to take on the same type of mindset as the Pharisees and scribes did. And here's a good example of this, that Jesus is talking about adultery and lusting after a woman, or really anything, but from the heart. Well, they're being okay with that, like we've been talking about. But John 8 and verse 4 shows us with the adulterous woman that they're not okay with the physical act of adultery. So there's a line they're saying, we're not going to cross this line. And of course, even in that instance, they weren't even following the law as a whole, because they only brought her to Jesus and not the guy that she was with. So there are certain parts that we're picking out, and we're saying we're going to hold these as as actual, truth and command and law, and this is it. But everything surrounding it, I don't know that that's really, quote unquote, as important as, we think that it is. So we can be the same way. When we talk about adultery, we talk about lying, we talk about, anything, you lay a topic on it, there's going to be a standard law, truth, idea, whatever that people hold that they're not going to move on, but there's going to be something around that they're like, well, but that's okay. So we've got to be careful about that because, like you said, coming up to the cliff, or we're coming pretty close to jumping off, but so the idea of leniency is a real thing, and I think that human beings have a tendency to be okay with that. And we justify certain actions. I'm not exempt from that, but we justify certain actions because either I've done it, or somebody that I love has done it, or maybe my congregation is okay with it, or, so-and-so, and you go on down the list, and then we begin to justify that behavior based on who's involved with the action and how we feel about that person or those people. And so getting into marriage and divorce and remarriage here shortly, we hit that all over the place. And we change our beliefs on MDR all the time based on who we're connected to for that particular teaching. So this is a slippery slope, and we can bash and hate on these guys all that we want, but the reality is we really are not that different when we really get down to it.
Yeah, and maybe it's maybe the cliff version of this, and the slippery slope even is a bad way to put it, because that's kind of what they were saying, is that it's not until you go over the cliff to adultery that it's a sin. I've always hated the slippery slope argument, because something could lead to sin doesn't mean that it's sin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you eat too much, it could lead to gluttony. That doesn't mean that eating is wrong, but like that's what they were saying, is you can, as long as you don't go over the edge to adultery, you're fine. But even the point, what Jesus is saying is even that lusting is sin. And to maybe put it in our terminology, what we try to do is we'll say stuff like, well, yeah, I'm doing that, but at least I'm not, or I'm not as bad as, that's what they were doing, is saying yeah, it's a sin, but it's not like a bad sin. It's kind of like on A Few Good Men, when he asked if he was he asked if he was in danger, and he said yes, and what's the word he used there?
Grave danger.
Now exactly.
Is there any other
grave
kind?
Grave danger. Is there any other kind? Is this a sin? Yes. Is it a bad sin? Is there any other kind? it's not that there's okay sins and worse sins, and that's the point. And I think in the next couple of verses here, he really shows that, because he's going to talk about like to the extreme of how far you ought to go to keep from wanting to. My Bible just jumped on me, but wanting to be caught up in these things. So he says, if you look down at verse 29, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better you lose one of your members than the whole body be thrown to hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better that you lose one of your members than the whole body to go to hell. And the right, in ancient times, the right hand and the right eye were considered, in the Jewish way of looking at things, as the two most important body parts. But what Jesus is saying, it's better to lose the dearest things in your life than to lose your soul. And he's going to, at the end of this sermon, he's really going to focus on that. In chapter 16 of Matthew, he's going to focus on that. But he's emphasizing just how far you ought to go to pursue righteousness. Now, he's not, again, this isn't literally. If we're literally pulling out eyes and we're literally cutting off hands, then first of all, that would obviously be a big mess. But worse than that, plucking out your eyes is not going to keep you from sinning in your heart. Now, there's been people over the course of time that have tried to make this literal, but that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that whatever it takes. We had a student one time at Bear Valley that admitted that he was addicted to pornography, and when he did so, of course, the leadership at the school tries to help individuals when they're in that situation, and one of the things is by you will put covenant eyes on your phone or whatever. And this young man says, well, I don't have a phone. And then he kind of looked at him like, I don't believe that. And he said, no. He said, where is it at? And he said, I threw it into Sloan's Lake, which is a big lake there in Denver. And sure enough, that's what he did, because he said, I know I can't have a phone. I'm just at the point that I realize I can't even have a phone. I can't be trusted with one. So he threw his phone. Now, I'm not saying you got to throw your phone in the lake. There may be better financial options for you on that. But that's what he's saying is if you're really pursuing righteousness, you're going to get rid of whatever it takes to pursue righteousness. You're not going to go places or have friends or, put yourself in a situation where that you can't handle it. And that's what he's trying to say in these verses of how important that pursuit of righteousness has to be.
Yeah, there's nothing that is worth so much that it gets in the way of heaven for you. Those things, It would be better to just get rid of those things than you hold on to those things like they mean something and be thrown into hell. And I think that is the point. And so, of course, this makes complete sense. We're talking about the inner man and how the inner man is who you are. It really is. Heart, soul, mind. Jesus, talks about straight. That's the inner person. It's who you are, the eternal self, the spirit, the soul of a person. That's what all of that means. And if we're going to love God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength, then we're giving our whole self to Him. And everything's dedicated to Him. Well, one of the big warnings, if you will, is in 1 John 2:16, talking about the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. These things are the three major categories that humanity has always had a problem with. I believe that they are the three major tools that Satan has to lead us away from God, because we have always had an issue with lust and pride. And so this is the very same thing. There is no difference whether we're lusting after, power or whatever it might be. Satan used this with Adam and Eve. Satan used this with Jesus. Satan will use this with us. And so Jesus is as he's talking here, the idea of lust is a powerful tool that Satan has that can lead you off course. And that lust, if it grows enough, can cultivate within you and become you and basically ruin your life. And so that is one reason why this is such a important teaching that Jesus is talking about here, because this is a real pull. This is a real thing. For us to act like this doesn't happen is foolish, because it does. And it can affect everybody. Male, female, doesn't really matter. You can be affected by this. And so this needs to be something that we are very aware of.
Yep.
So that takes us down to verse 32, well, really 31, where it says, "It was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you," now remember, Jesus is speaking as by way of authority, "but I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the reason of unchastity, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So where are we going with this, Corey?
Well, here again, we got you've heard it said, but I say unto you, divorce was allowed in Jewish circles, but it involved, you had to give your wife to divorce her. Now, women couldn't divorce their husbands per se, but husbands could divorce their wives. But in order to do so, you gave them a legal certificate of divorce that was called a get. And again, going back to the Mishnah that you mentioned a while ago, there's a whole tract of the Mishnah, the Gittin, which is spelled Gitten if you're looking it up, but that talks all about this, okay? And basically, the get said that they were able to marry any man that they wanted. What it did was it protected the woman from being charged with adultery, because if the man divorced her because she burnt the toast or whatever, and she tried to marry someone else and didn't have the certificate, she would be stoned for adultery because she's trying to join herself to a man that, when she's still with someone else, she could produce this certificate and say, "See, he gave me my release," you might say. So the Pharisees had this concept of, you can divorce whoever you want for whatever reason you want, as long as you give her a certificate, okay? That was the kindness that you were to show your wife as you kicked her out of the house, was at least give her her papers so that she could go get married to another man. But Jesus is saying, think about what that does to her. Because if you've divorced her for burning the toast, well, she's not scripturally able to marry someone else. But by kicking her out of the house, especially in that day and time, you have forced her in a position where she's going to have to find somebody to get married. We don't understand that as well today, but then women usually didn't work outside the home. They might sell something like Lydia did, but those were kind of side things, and they couldn't be as self-supporting as women today. So to survive, she would have had to have found another man. And if she did remarry, then she would be guilty of adultery, and the one who married her would be guilty of adultery. All because you had a man who wasn't pursuing righteousness, and the Pharisee said it's okay to divorce her as long as you give her this certificate. But that's not the case. The bond wasn't broken by the divorce. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder, right? So Jesus does add the exception clause, except for the case of immorality. But the point that he's making, and he's going to go into greater detail about this in chapter 19, when the Pharisees and scribes again come to him with a question about this very issue. But what he's saying is that God intends for husbands and wives to stay married. That, there's no there's no, you try to figure out how to work things out. You know, you don't just, because she burns the toast, you don't kick her out and say, well, you can go marry somebody else. That's not the way that it works. And so again, they're relaxing the law, making it easier, has put people in a position where they're actually going to sin more. But if you're pursuing righteousness, then that's not what you're going to be. You're not going to try to live on that edge or whatever. You're going to do what God says. Jesus' definition of what righteousness is all about.
Yeah, and I've been kind of scrolling through as you've been talking here. I've got the Mishnah pulled up. I don't know exactly where you were pulling some of that stuff from, but the Mishnah is actually pretty easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
You can read through that, but you will be amazed at all.
I'm trying to see. If you look down at like 9. You're at 2, I think. It's hard for me to see.
4 or 5.
I'm on my smaller screen.
All right, we're at 9
Look
here.
at 9. Start about verse 3 there. You've got it underlined in your thing.
The text of the writ of divorce is as follows. Lo, you are permitted to any man. R. Judah says in Aramaic, let this be from me your writ of divorce, letter of dismissal, and deed of liberation, that you may marry anyone you want. The text of the writ of the emancipation is as follows. Lo, you are a free girl. Lo, you are your own possession.
Yeah. But see, that's not what God intended. Just because a husband says, my wife is free to marry somebody else, that doesn't mean God says
That's right.
that she's free to marry someone else.
That's right.
See? And that, again, you've heard it said. Well, where do they hear it said? In chapter 9, verse 3 of the Gittin, or however you're supposed to say it. I speak fluent Tennessean, but not not fluent. Anyway, you've heard it said here in 9:3. But I say unto you, and it's kind of in Matthew chapter 19, can a man divorce his wife for any reason? And Jesus comes right back and says, let's go back to what God intended from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. That a man and a woman would be married, and they would be married until death parted them. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And then, of course, they say, then why did Moses command to give her a certificate? And he talks about, you're wanting to look at the exceptions to the rule because of the hardness of your heart. But it wasn't that way from the beginning. That's not what God intended. Just because God allowed you to follow your own path doesn't mean God approved of your own path, And, we could go on along, as you said, there's so many different opinions that people have tried to put into something like this. It's a controversial, it's not a controversial subject when we read it until we have a personal issue. But maybe I wrote a paper on this text at one point when I was working on my master's, and the reason I did, so I would have something I could just give to people. But one of the things that your interpretation of Matthew 19, 1 through 9, and I don't know how much you want to chase this rabbit. I didn't know that we would end up over here. I'm the one that brought it up, so it's my fault. But your interpretation of Matthew 19, 1 through 9 has got to fit what happens in verse 10 then. The disciples said to him, if that's the case, then you'd be better off not to marry at all. Mm-hmm. So whatever your interpretation of when marriage, divorce, and remarriage is allowed has to be such a shocking interpretation that a disciple would say, well, you'd be better off not getting married at all if that was the case, And then verses 11 and 12, he's talking about eunuchs, but he's not really talking about eunuchs. He's using them as an illustration. There's some that have been born a eunuch. In other words, there's some people, and it's probably few, that can say, well, I can go through life without a physical sexual relationship, so I don't need to get married. Paul would say later on, it's better to marry than to burn, right? And then he says there's some that have been made eunuchs by men. So if my wife decides that she's going to leave me because I don't mow the yard often enough, well, that's not a reason for me to be remarried again. So she's made me a eunuch in that she left me. I didn't want her to. I tried to work it out, but she left me. So now I can't have a relationship with another woman because I've been made a eunuch by her. And then there's some that are made eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, which means that there's some people, like if I were to cheat on my wife and she divorces me, which she has the right to, then if I'm going to be righteous, if I'm going to be right in the sight of God, then I've got two choices. I can either be rejoined to my wife, but if she marries somebody else, that's not going to happen. So I'm going to have to be a eunuch. If I'm going to be right in the sight of God, I'm going to have to keep myself out of those kinds of relationships to submit to God's will. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're going through a whole lot of theology in just a few minutes, and there may be some that don't agree with that and would like to know more about that or study more about that. And you can contact Garrett, and he'll be glad to go through all that with you. But see what I did there? But that's what Jesus is teaching in Matthew 19. And going back to our original text of Matthew 5, that's what he's teaching there. I didn't mean to take over everything, but
no, that's good. Yeah,
anyway, it's one of those things we just don't. And I'll be honest with you, I love it when people ask me to preach on marriage or do a marriage retreat or do a marriage seminar or something like that. There's lots of guys that do those kind of, Wayne and Tammy Roberts, who we love, do that. Trey and Leah Morgan, John and Carla Moore. It's a wise thing for church leaderships to provide for their congregations, because what we tend to do is we want to focus on the DR. If we spent more time on the M, mm-hmm. we wouldn't have to worry about the DR so much. You know, that's Corey 3:16 a little bit, but I think it's the truth that we want to, like these Pharisees, we want to focus on what's the exception instead of focusing on the rule. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell people, if I told you, except after C, what would that mean to you? Well, nothing. But if I tell you I before E, except after C, oh, well, now I know what the rule is, I before E, then the exception makes better sense. And that's what Jesus is teaching. Matthew 5, Matthew 19 is the rule is God intended for us to, when we made a covenant with Him and our spouse, to be in that covenant. And except for the cause of immorality, or let me look here. Yours says unchastity. The idea, of course, is intercourse with someone mm-hmm. other than your spouse. But except for that, we're supposed to be either with our spouse or working on reconciliation with our spouse, or we've made ourselves a eunuch. Mm-hmm. So I'll hush up now and let you talk.
There's so many different texts that refer to this. Of course, right here in Matthew 5, but this is repeated throughout the ministry of Jesus. And Matthew 19, as you already mentioned, huge part, but Paul discusses this. It's amazing how marriage even becomes an illustration for things. Romans chapter 7, yes. Marriage is the illustration for law. And so there's only two ways that you can get out of a marriage, Paul says in Romans 7, and that's death or adultery, or maybe a better word, fornication, right? This is the actual sexual, physical act that you have committed. Now, again, I think the important thing is that it doesn't say you have to get divorced. It says that right. This is an opportunity that could happen. So don't get that confused. But Paul is using the marriage which the Jews already understood. They understood that adultery and death are the only two ways out of a marriage. And he illustrates, and he's teaching on law that you cannot be connected to or under a law that no longer exists, and you cannot be, under another law that is no longer there, and then be it, you can't be following one and then under another. None of this makes any sense. So that continues on. 1 Corinthians 7 also, he looks at several different groups. But as he looks at the unmarrieds, the marrieds, and those who are Christian and their husbands or wives leaves them, there's a lot of things discussed there. But all of those teachings of Paul, the teachings of Peter, they all align with what Jesus is saying here. They are not saying something different. So we cannot make them say something different because we're connected to a situation. We cannot be lenient on this and say, well, this one's okay. No, it's not. It either fits or it doesn't fit. So there's a great danger with this teaching on marriage, divorce, remarriage, because we are willing to make exceptions where there is no exception. And so when we're talking about lust, as we started this, lust is coming from the inner man and the inner person, for anybody. And that causes you to, can cause great sin. But then the other struggle of the Pharisees and the scribes and all the people here is the idea of divorce because, well, Moses gave us a certificate. Well, he says later, it's because of your hardness of heart. And of course, you already went into that. So Jesus is laying this out. He's telling us this is the deal. Everyone who divorces his wife, except for the reason of unchastity, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. This is plain teaching here. But then he goes into verse 33. Again, you have heard. Again, going back to we can read the Mishnah here. That the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. So this is not just with one teaching. This is with multiple teachings that they have been involved in and of course with. So here's a few other scriptures that just kind of noting them down, and we'll put these in the show notes. We've looked at, talked about Job 31 and verse 1, 1 John 3:15, 1 John 2:16, John 8 and verse 4. If you're looking in the Mishnah, we looked at that Gittan or the Oklahoma version Gittin 9 and 3. But then you have Matthew 19, verse 1 through 10. Those are several places. 1 Corinthians 7, Romans 7, 1 through about 8 or 9. All of those, really correlate to what we've been searching for and looking at today. So you have the popular school of thought, and then you have Jesus's school of thought. And if those do not line up, there's a problem. And there's only one standard. There's only one authority. You can take yours.
And the problem ain't with Jesus. The problem is with me.
That's right. So, it.
And the big difference in Matthew 5 and Matthew 19 is Matthew 5, he's trying to get them not to be so trigger happy and keep divorcing their wives because you're setting up two sins. The wife sinning by marrying someone else and the one who marries her, the sin that he commits. Then when you get to Matthew 19, what he's really focusing on is the righteousness that God wants is for there to be one man and one woman for life. They're all, you put it together and you get the whole kind of view of all this. But anyway, like you said, there's their level of righteousness or their standard of righteousness they've had, and then there's what Jesus says is the standard that he wants us to have, and that's the one we got to focus on. Mm-hmm. And I know it's like I said earlier, when you're studying it in the Bible, it's pretty clear, what is said. The problem comes in when we get personal stories. And usually when you talk about or teach about marriage, divorce, or marriage, well, I've got a cousin's friend who married, and well, take all the personal issues out and just look at what does the text say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. I get that. But we've got to be, as men and women of God, we've got to be honest with what the text says and God's standard of righteousness rather than, what fits our emotions and what we'd rather's.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and add in here 1 Corinthians 7, 10 and 11 to this, where Paul writes, "But to the married I give instructions, not I but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband, but if she does leave, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce his wife." So again, we have an alignment here, and that alignment needs to hold together. Now, I think you hit this on the head, and I know that we're at the end of our time here. Why is this such a big deal? I think you've nailed it. This is emotional, and we can't discredit that this is emotional. This involves families. This involves people. This involves love. This involves a lot of different things. So by us saying we need to hold to the standards of Jesus and his teachings, and then that's a blanket statement, we don't have anything else to say, that's because that's the truth. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't sympathize if that's what you're going through. That doesn't mean that we need to be dogmatic and hateful about your situation. That's not what that means either. I can teach somebody the truth and bring them to Jesus, and I can also teach somebody the truth and drive them away from Jesus. It's all in how we approach, all of this stuff. We need to do all of this out of love. That is so very important, especially with this subject, because so many are connected to something, somebody, some couple, some family that has this within their life for one reason or another. And this also needs to be stated that this is not for the Christian. This is for every person. The institution of marriage was not made for Christians. It was made for humanity. And so this is at the beginning of Jesus' marriage. The gospel is being introduced. He's not talking to Christians here. He's talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to the disciples. He's talking to the people around him. So this is not just for one people. This is for all people. And all people can get into a state, whether it's marriage or, alcoholism or gambling or, whatever it might be, whatever thing that involves lust or pride, we can get ourselves in a deep hole, and it's really hard to get ourselves out of. But it's worth it. It's worth getting yourself out of that situation. It's worth moving forward. Even if you have to change your entire life, it's worth it. So if we look through this from the perspective or the lens of Christ and what he's teaching, then we might be able to see the whole picture. Because if we continue to look at it through our own lens, then again, this whole idea of lenience or exception becomes a reality for us in our heart. And again, like we said earlier, our job is not to make our own rules. Our job is to follow his rules. We may not like all of them. We may not, I would really like to do it this way. That's fine. But again, if you want to make your own world, you want to create all your own people, you want to do all this stuff, then you can make the rules at that point. But until then, we have one job, and that's to be obediently faithful to the Lord above all things and above ourselves. And if we can be humble in that way, then I think that we're going to be better for it. It may be hard. It may be a challenge, but it's what's right. And so if you're in a bad situation or something like this, we certainly feel for you and are praying for you, and would love to help you in any way that we can, even to study with you. We would love to do that, but we've got to be committed to the teachings of Jesus. Well, Corey, do you have anything else you want to offer here as we end this? I think we're going to go into a part 3 of this because we made it through the next contrast, but we've got more to discuss. So,
yeah, we've got vows and or oaths, whichever, revenge, or as Barney Fife once said, revenge, love. So, country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads.
What a great way to
take us
end.
home, Gary.
What a great way to end whenever we have just gone into a serious topic.
That's why I'm here for the comedy. I've told you from the very get-go.
That is true. You are the comedic relief. That is your gift.
I'm not very smart. I'm not very deep, but I can give a little bit of lighten the mood a little bit.
Give a little bit of love. There you go. Well, Corey,
I hear her voice in the moonlight. She calls me.
Well, we're going to end this so you don't have to.
The radio reminds me of my home far away.
We are glad that you have joined us today, and we hope that this study has been beneficial for you. It's always a great study for us. There's a lot of things to think about. The Sermon on the Mount is a challenging sermon from the greatest preacher who ever lived, and it's meant for transformation. It's meant to hold us to a standard, and that's what he's introducing. And so this should challenge us. It should challenge all of us to reconsider what we're doing, how we're living, what we're following. And so we hope that our discussion has helped you to also look inwardly to make sure that you, as a follower of Jesus, are doing that very same thing. And that's what Corey and I are trying to do every day as well, is to really ask ourselves, am I walking this path? And to be honest about that. So these are all good questions to ask ourselves as we try to mold ourselves and reflect the light of Jesus to be the salt of the earth, as he has already said earlier within this sermon. So we are so glad that you've joined us today. We hope that you will join us again next week for another episode of the Untied podcast, where we bring you episode 8, where we'll continue on through the Sermon on the Mount and the teachings that Jesus is offering to us. As always, we hope that you will like, share, follow, and subscribe to this podcast. Help this to grow and share it with everybody that you know. So until next time, we hope that the Lord will bless you in your daily walk with him. And until next time, stay untied.
And driving down the road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday.